I am a social business consultant at AnsIView. I'm not going to go into too much of what I actually do and what that actually means. It's a bigger story, and I only have 20 minutes, and you can find most of that online anyway. What I do want to talk to you today about is how to leverage community for your SEO benefit. To frame up this conversation, though, I want to start by defining what I mean by community. It's not necessarily the neighborhood you live in. Rather, we're talking about your web community. And this looks a little bit different depending on the framework that we put around it. So this is the framework that I want to put around our conversation today. There's 3 different layers to the community as I see it. The core of your community, the core of your SEO, the core of your social media strategy really lies on your website, your owned property. These are going to be not only your website, but your blogs, your forums, any support communities that you have that that are on your own properties. Beyond that, you also have your occupied properties, and those are going to be off-site, not necessarily owned, but you have a presence there. You have a profile, you have an account, for example, whether that's on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter. Those are places that you occupy and you have an official presence. Beyond that, we have visiting communities. These are sites that you don't have a profile, for example. You don't necessarily have an official presence, but what you do have is the ability to enter, participate, and act as an ambassador for your brand. So I hope that that kind of sets a little bit of the stage for what we're going to talk about going forward. Now that you've got your communities identified, I think the next big step in leveraging community for SEO is really being able to monitor and measure community health. It's really hard to leverage a community effectively that's sick. And by sick, I mean one that's not healthy, one where people are not participating, one in which engagement is absent. So measuring the health of your community in an ongoing way will help you keep kind of a temperature as to what's going on, and then enables you to then fix problems as you identify them. Typically, this tends to be the job of a social media professional. If you have one on your team, if there's one in-house or one on your agency, this would possibly be their job. Hopefully, they're doing it. If they're not, you as SEOs tend to be the analytics and measurements professionals, and you know a lot about this kind of thing. So I would encourage you to step forward and help them find ways to create some kind of a measurement framework or dashboard to keep an eye on your health, so then you can swoop in and take advantage of that. If you don't have somebody on staff that's doing this, then I encourage you to maybe take a high-level look. I know you've got a lot going on already, but take a high-level look at what you can keep an eye on. And I'm actually going to bust into some of those examples right now. There's a lot of different measurements that you can look at in terms of community health. I'm only going to touch on a few right now. The first one is for support forums, for example. This is where a lot of the bigger sites see most of their community activity. For example, if you're EMC or an AT&T, a lot of your community efforts are going to be around your support forums. So some of the things that you might want to look at there are going to be time to community response. Somebody asks a question. How long does it take a community member to step in and answer that question? Number of questions marked as answered, tagged as awesome, or thumbed up, or marked as closed because they got the resolution. You can also look at deflection, for example, as another metric of your community health. How many questions are coming into the forum, getting answered, and then not resulting in a phone call, which, as you can imagine, are much more expensive. If we're talking about a Facebook community, it's a little bit different. You're going to start looking at things like engagement. Engagement, depending on how you're defining it, can be a lot of different things. In terms of Facebook and measuring community health, I would probably say that these are going to be things like likes on content, how many people are commenting on content that you're posting, how many people are sharing the content you're posting. Beyond that, you're also going to look at posts per day. How many people are participating on your wall? How often are you participating on your own wall? Maybe a ratio thereabouts. You can look at click-through rate. You can look at conversion from the traffic coming from your Facebook account. Bottom line is that there's not a list that I can give you. There's not even necessarily best practices that you can follow. The crux of the measurement, though, comes back to mapping your goals, what you're trying to accomplish from your community, back to what you can measure. So as long as you're measuring the things that tell you whether or not you're getting closer to your goals, as long as you're doing that, you're measuring the right things. If you're going to ask about best practices, which I know that's the tendency, like what should my click-through rate be? What should my engagement be? You're probably not going to get that from me. You might get that from somebody else. What I'm going to tell you, though, is what you need to do is go in and create a benchmark for yourself. And that benchmark can be against yourself over time. It can be against a competitive set that you've defined and measured again over time. I would encourage you to think critically about that benchmark, though. Set it and move forward and measure yourself over time against competitors and maybe even some people that aren't direct competitors to get some feel for what's right. Beyond the community health, the next best way I think to leverage your community for SEO benefit is through awareness of content and brand. If they can't find you or if they don't know about you, they can't link to you. One of the most basic elements of SEO benefit from this awareness element, I think, is the secondary link concept. And most of you are probably familiar with this. But essentially, when somebody finds your content through a social channel, they like it. Some of them, hopefully more than some of them, go out, write about it, and link to it. So that's what I mean when I say secondary link. One of my favorite ways to increase awareness on a channel-specific methodology would be Twitter. And utilizing Twitter chats is something that I think is not only really fun, because you get to talk about things that are relevant to you and your product and your brand, but they have a ton of benefit. This spreadsheet here is probably one of my most often bookmarked and most often shared elements. I've got the URL up there for you, and I encourage you to pull that down and take a look at it. It outlines almost 500 Twitter chats that are current and ongoing. And I would challenge you to find a Twitter chat that isn't somehow relevant to either your product or your brand. If you can't find one, then I would say that's an opportunity for you to go ahead and take advantage of. Secondary benefit of these Twitter chats are quite often not the moderator, but the sponsor or the host of the Twitter chat will write up a transcript, or even participants will sometimes blog about the things that they learned. So there's kind of that secondary link benefit in addition to the awareness that you're going to get. Facebook is, of course, an amazing way to get awareness around your content and your brand. At almost 4 billion shares a day on Facebook, it's a very active community. People spend large chunks of their day, probably too large, admittedly, even for myself, on Facebook. It gets a little bit more complicated, though, when you start talking about EdgeRank. I don't know how many of you are familiar with EdgeRank, but essentially, it's Facebook's way of deciding if you matter. Not as a person. This isn't personal. You all matter. But it's their way of deciding if your content matters to your audience. There's three different factors that they look at. What kind of affinity your particular audience has with you. So for example, you're a brand, I'm your consumer. What kind of affinity do we have? How many interactions have we had in the past? Do I really like you? Do I ever interact with you? If so, then I'm more likely to see your content. If not, I probably will never see it. Whether it's in top news or most recent, it doesn't really matter. Timeliness of the content, if it's old, Facebook understands that nobody really cares, so they're not going to show it to anybody. And then the interactions. If a piece of content has a lot of likes, a lot of comments, a lot of shares, it's far more likely to be shared than something that isn't. So I encourage you, when you're talking about Facebook and you're creating content, you're sharing content there, to do it in a way that really is going to encourage that activity, that's going to encourage participation. Ask for participation. Ask questions. Get people to share. Content like links and video tend to get a lot more clicks, especially video, because they play it right there. Links for obvious reasons. So really think about the content that you're putting out there and put it out there in a way that's going to increase the likelihood that it's going to get seen. I get asked a lot about contests and how those work for SEO and if they still work or not, and my answer is yes, of course they still work, but only if you do it right. A lot of contests fall flat because so many of them are, tweet at me and get a free iPod or iPad, whatever. Those are fine, those are fun, and I'm not knocking them. Some of them are even done really well, but those are kind of boring now. So I encourage you to not knock out the idea of a contest completely, but if you're going to do it well and get creative. Queensland tourism is one of my favorite examples, and it's a little old, so you've probably heard it before, but it's by far my favorite, so I keep using it, so sorry. They did a really great job at creating an integrated campaign around this contest. There was branded Facebook, branded Twitter, branded YouTube. They had user-generated content that was coming in left and right, and you can see some of the results. Over 8 million unique visits, 55 million page views, and their time on site went through the roof for them. So another important element, in addition to being creative, is making sure that the elements of your contest are mapping directly back to your goals. Do you need to increase page views? Do you need to increase impressions on ads you've got? Make sure you are encouraging people through the elements of your contest to come back to your site. Otherwise, you're not really getting anywhere. Some thoughts on sharing, because like we said on Twitter and on Facebook and in contests, sharing is so important. Sharing is the crux of what social is in terms of SEO. If you don't make it easy, they will not do it. If you paralyze them out of sharing, it will not happen. I hesitate to use Mashable as an example. Love them or hate them, I think that they do a good job at encouraging sharing. They make it easy, they make it obvious, and they make it efficient. When you go to a Mashable article, it is really easy to share. Boom, 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 buttons everywhere. It's obvious. They're right at the top of the content. I don't have to hunt. I don't have to go expand more. I don't have to look for those buttons at all. In fact, they give me so many options that it would almost be overwhelming, except for they're very efficient at it. You can see the pop out there is, it's a little fuzzy. Sorry about that. But what that is Mashable Share. You click on the Mashable Share, and it lets you share to a variety of their most popular sharing sites. One at a time, multiple at a time, whatever. So there's lots of good examples. This is just one I really like. Back to the sharing, especially in Mashable, you notice that they didn't throw up every social icon that there is. There wasn't a Reddit. There wasn't a Stumble. There wasn't a whatever button. There's 85 bajillion buttons now. They have a very specific set of buttons that they use, and they've been able to determine what buttons to use because they're measuring the interactions on those. Google Analytics recently, I think about 2 weeks ago maybe, implemented some of this measurement into GA. There's a lot of other measurement portals that do this as well. If you're going to put social buttons on your website, measure them, measure them, measure them. Measure people that are clicking on them, measure the activity around them, measure their load speed, for crying out loud. Make sure that you know which buttons are being used, which ones are not being used, which sites are content's being pushed to, and that will help you really increase the efficiency of those buttons for your users. So listening from an SEO perspective has traditionally been around site analytics and search data, and then in social, it's been around conversation, and more, those two things have to come together. Your customers are telling you exactly what they want from you. They are telling you what content they need. They're telling you what questions they have, what answers they want. They're showing you what's interesting to them. Your only job is to sift through the data and give them what they want, give them what they're asking for. One of the best ways to do this, I think, is by sifting through the conversation data. This tool, Trender, you can try it out on the URL down there below. Is just one of many. You can do this through Google Trends. You can do this in Radian 6 and monitor velocity of conversation, for example. But capitalize on the trends that you're seeing in conversations to create content that people are talking about and people want to share right now. That brings me to the sales funnel. My version of the sales funnel looks a little different than what you're probably used to seeing. My version of the sales funnel has two ends, an input and an output. The input here is your content. The process is very similar. Nothing. I mean, I'm not changing the way the world works here. I'm just changing the way I frame it. Your content goes in one end. Media, bloggers, there's engagement there. There's engagement. Your customer engages. They have an experience around your content. Hopefully, if you've got your landing pages set up and all your buttons in the right place and everything's working right, there's a conversion that happens at some place. After the conversion, if you're managing those relationships effectively, and you're continuing that conversation and you're continuing that engagement, you're going to end up with some word of mouth. You're going to end up with some word of mouth around your product, around your brand. And eventually, if you continue that and you continue that relationship, you're going to have advocacy happening. Advocacy and your advocates are what's most important here. From your advocates, you can actually pull out influencers. They are your red thread through that sales funnel. The influencers are the ones that you really want to start paying attention to and start targeting. This slide shows some technographic profile data that I pulled from Forrester. It basically just breaks down user behavior by gender. So there's two slides here. They're both essentially the same. I just, more than anything, wanted to give you them both as a resource. But you can see that there's a big group of people on the side, the left-hand side, there's creators and conversationalists and collectors and whatnot. That's very small, and then everybody else is really big. These are the people that you want to focus on. These are where the influencers lie. This small group, well, it's not small. There's 4 out of 7, but seemingly small in volume. These are the people that are going to influence the masses. These are the people that are creating content, that are sharing content, that are having conversations around your content. These are the people you want to focus on. In my work, I actually use a little bit different language than they do. I've broken it out into these 4 types: critic, collector, creator, and connector. And I'm not going to go through this slide and read you all of the bullets. This slide is really meant to be used as an asset, so I know this doesn't follow best practices in any way. But later on, go back through and read this. What it's meant to do is provide a framework for you to understand user behavior, and by understanding their behavior, you can understand what motivates them, how you can incentivize them to further action, how you can reward them, and how you can keep that process going of them influencing their audience. Why do you want to do this? Well, in theory, their opinion and your product are relevant to their audience. They have authority amongst their audience, and they have an audience. They also, hopefully, have an established platform, whether that be a large social network, a blog with a lot of readers, whatever that is. They have a platform to utilize. From this, you get high-quality traffic, you get word of mouth, you get increased advocacy from your brand, and you get lots of links. So how do you find these people? I've got 3 tools really quick that I'm going to run through. One of my favorite is Followerwonk. Again, the URL is down there at the bottom for you to go check out. You can search Twitter followers, not just followers. You can search Twitter accounts based on location, based on keyword. They give you a ton of information around them, how many followers they have, how many people they follow. They even have a proprietary score called Wonk score or something. I forget what it's called. But it allows you to kind of gauge against each other the influence that person, in theory, has. And even better for all you data junkies, you can actually export that. Another one that I like is Crowdbooster. Again, it does very similar things, but this one analyzes your current following, so the people that are already following you. So it's a little bit different take. But these people have already kind of stepped forward. They've raised their hand as being interested. Now your job is to find out which are the ones that are most influential and identify them to further engage with them. Exportly, I know, has already been mentioned. It is one of my favorite tools, so I'm going to say a couple words about it anyway. It's made by Simply Measured, like was said before. This tool, again, allows you to analyze current following, but it also allows you to export all of that raw data. It looks at time zones that these people are from. It looks at number of followers they have. It tells you when they're most active. So you can really start engaging with them on their time, whether that's through scheduled tweets. However you feel on that philosophically is up to you. But it also allows you to export that data so you can import it into a database, into CRM, however you're going to use it. This brings me back to content, which goes all the way back to the beginning of the funnel. Content is hard to create. It takes a lot of time, and I understand that. So don't think I don't get that. But one of my favorite ways is through guest and host blogging. Guest blogging does take a lot of time. Host blogging takes a little bit less. In your guest and host blogging, I would encourage you to think about it from both a vertical and a horizontal perspective. And by that, I mean, say I run a gift site and I target mothers. It's yourmom.com. Sorry, I was challenged to work yourmom.com into my presentation, and I did it. So you own a site, and you're trying to spread your content, and you have gifts for mothers. You can go out and you can guest blog on all these other mom-related sites, guest-related or gift-related sites, or you can go on to other sites like toy niches, for example, and talk about why toys make great gifts for moms too. I mean, so really look at it from a horizontal and a vertical perspective, and your options are going to be really varied, and you're going to get a lot of variance in your links and your content. There's a lot of benefits there, which I don't think I need to go into for you guys. Leveraging your community for organizations is really powerful. This works best for like support communities and forum type communities where they're tagging things and they're marking as answered and they're sifting content. But this is all work that you're having somebody else do. So leverage that energy for your benefit and help them to help you by giving them these tools. You can also get a little bit creative and think about ways that you can put these on your more traditional sites like your blogs. And I know SEO Moz actually has thumbs up, thumbs down. This would be a similar variation on that. So discoverability, I'm going to start talking faster because I'm running out of time. Twitter is not just a discovery engine, but it's also increasingly being used as a search engine. Now, it pales in comparison to the volume that Google has, but it still has volume, and don't discount it. Recently, in fact, I think like 3 days ago, I stole this from Brian, so feel free to tweet at him and tell him I stole it. This is a snapshot of the new search page, and you can see that it's surfacing content in a new way. It's not just a raw data feed anymore. It's also highlighting top tweets, top profiles. So keep this in mind when you're tweeting and use it to your advantage. Facebook, what do you say about Facebook? More and more people are using it for search. I don't know why. I think it's horribly awkward, cumbersome, and ineffective, but apparently 500 million plus people a day choose to use it. This leads really nicely right into the social signals for search, which has been covered really well on SEO Moz ranking factors recently. So I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm sure you guys have all read those over and over again. Most recently, I wanted to call out that Google and Twitter recently broke up. It was very sad. Google is now on a rebound relationship with Google+, though, so that's promising for them. But don't discount the data that Google still has available. They have come out and said, yes, we still have data that we're using. It's available to anybody, and we're still looking at it. It's also a discovery engine. There's aggregators. I think there's a new one every 11 seconds now. So this is another way that content is being surfaced. Bing and Facebook, we talked about the EdgeRank. It's not just important on Facebook. It also is important on the actual search engine result pages. So when you're putting content on Facebook, make sure that it's content that people are going to engage with, otherwise they might not ever see it. This is a no-brainer. I don't even know why I put it in here. Your search result pages on keyword-specific queries, you can help dominate your results. And I'm not picking on Gamehouse. I know for a fact there's at least one other person here that used to work there. I used to work there. So some results, you can take up some more real estate. So I'm just about done. I have a couple more things that I want to run through really quickly, and I know I'm out of time. I'm going to talk really fast, I promise. The first is this Facebook Army. This is one of my favorite and probably most cited blog posts, and I never see anybody utilizing it. Go to this link, check it out. Justin Kistner from WebTrends broke down how to remarket to people that have liked, for example, product pages. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but definitely go check it out and do this. It's awesome. Something that I saw recently in the last week or so is +1 is in the results. Yeah, that's awesome. But what's more important, I think, is the author page that's showing up. The author profile pic that's showing up now in the search results. It's a pretty dramatic change to the visual impact of the search result pages. HubSpot put together a really nice blog post on how to actually implement it. I pulled out the 3 steps that they outlined, but go to their blog. They did it a much better job than I did. But for your reference, I put the 3 steps there to take advantage of that. So now I'm done. Thanks.